Oh, why the hell is it snowing outside?
Because it's November.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the most wonderful time of the year if you if you love movies. It's the hottest season where every time you look around, a new good movie comes out, hoping for an Oscar. This is not one of those movies.
No, today we are seeing Thor Ragnarok.
It's the end of the world, as Thor knows it.
And we feel fine.
So, we did the second Thor movie as our second episode of the show, way back in 2013. Wow,
yeah. But in that time, we said that it was good, but forgettable. And boy, should we forget it.
Yes, because all these years later, we saw it twice in the theaters and multiple times since then, and most of what happened in that movie, we have forgotten. And honestly, the Thor movies are the weakest franchise. Incredible Hulk is the weakest movie, but Thor, overall, as a franchise, is the weakest.
Yeah.
So, which is why the Thor movies have had kind of an identity crisis ever since their inception.
Well, obviously the first one was just to introduce Thor.
It was and clearly they took Stanley's heavy Shakespearean influence when he created the character, and they had Kenneth Branagh direct it and act it, making it a Shakespearean epic with a fish out of water story.
Then they tried Game of Thrones in it by grabbing Game of Thrones director Alan Taylor for the sequel, and he is not.
He's been one of those directors who's been very vocal about how Marvel kind of wrests control away from the filmmakers sometimes.
However, I think in his case, he was not willing to play ball to do what make the kind of movie Marvel wanted him to make. Whereas with people like James Gunn, who has had total creative control over the Guardians franchise, was more than willing to play ball with anything Marvel did, even though, according to him, he has not had to play ball that much.
Speaking of the Guardians movies, that's where we are now. Thor Marvel clearly took the success of Guardians of the Galaxy, and they thought, you know what? Thor has kind of been our weak point, has kind of been the point that kind of shows we are almost human. So let's just take our most popular franchise right now, Guardians of the Galaxy, and let's stick Thor into it, which has been made obvious by the way that they've incorporated rock music and aliens and all this comedy, which is obvious when you consider who they got to direct it.
Taika Waititi. For the last 3 years, I've been hoping not to screw that name up.
And honestly, there's a lot to like about this. I mean, Taika Waititi is the first person of color to direct a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. Yes, I had to make it specific. All those Guillermo del Toro fanboys would probably say, but they too, yeah, got it. But anyway, yes, Taika Waititi, the first person of color to direct a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, beating Ryan Coogler out by making his movie first. And also, his name's just fun to say, Taika Waititi, Taika Waititi, Taika Waititi.
The last two movies have been huge indie hits with What We Do in the Shadows and Hunt for the Wilder People, two of movies we have not seen.
But we've heard good things. But Taika Waititi is essentially one of those guys who took kind of the Richard Linklater School of Rock approach to this. Basically, like, I'm kind of an indie guy, but I'll make a summer blockbuster. They're throwing money at me, and I would think I'd have fun with it.
He's also taking the Jon Favreau School of directing a superhero movie, because we have the best friend from a crappily received superhero movie, the star of whom got redeemed eventually, coming in and directing being awesome at directing a superhero movie.
Yes, because we've got Jon Favreau was in the original Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck, and Taika Waititi played Ryan Reynolds' nerdy comic relief best friend in Green Lantern. Nerd. Yeah, I shouldn't even remember that he had a nerdy comic relief best friend in that movie. Yeah. But he did, and it was Taika Waititi. He pretty much between indie darling movies.
Yeah.
But what do we got but let's just talk about this movie, Thor Ragnarok. People have been wanting this movie. Ever since the movie was announced, people were like, oh, you're adapting the Ragnarok storyline, this is going to be big. And then they announced Mark Ruffalo was going to be in it as the Hulk. And then they released And then at Comic-Con, about 2 years ago, they brought out the big guns. A giant statue of the Hulk in his battle armor from World War Hulk.
Yep. We're getting a World War Hulk story.
We're getting that story. Now, for years, you have been saying we don't want a Planet Hulk movie. Why? Because the Marvel Cinematic Universe of the Hulk of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is not the Hulk of the comics. It's a completely different feel. People liked Mark Ruffalo's performance as the Hulk in the Avengers because it was Mark Ruffalo. He had a performance down. We didn't want. Our biggest argument is that Hulk can't speak in full sentences in this particular iteration of himself. We'll see what happens in this movie.
Not to mention the fact that that Bruce Banner is that it would just be Avatar with the Hulk in it.
That would not be a good thing. We used to be Avatar apologists until we kind of realized, Avatar is kind of boring.
It's really overrated.
It's all right, but it's kind of boring and a little overrated. But enough about Avatar. And the 5 sequels they're going to be making, and boy, it's not going to be bad.
Yeah.
But anyway, Mark Ruffalo is going to be in this. It's going to be the kickoff of a 3-movie arc that the Hulk is going to be going through, starting with Ragnarok, going into Infinity War, and finishing up in the whatever they decide to call Avengers Secret War. Just shit. Anyway, Mark Ruffalo's in it. We got Chris Hemsworth in it. Kate Blanchett is the villain.
We have Tom Hiddleston, who's of course brilliant as Loki every time.
I've seen one scene called Get Help, which is hilarious, and I'm loving the fact that they're making this such a straight comedy.
We have Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum is in this movie. It's gonna be fun because I don't know if anyone in Hollywood has really been missing Jeff Goldblum. Honestly, I haven't, because growing up I never saw Jeff Goldblum and thought I want to see a lot of him. But I think Jeff Goldblum's got a big enough fan base that people have been missing him.
Yeah,
they have seen him, and it's kind of nice that he's back in this and Independence Day, and even though we didn't see Independence Day 2. But he's going to be back in Jurassic World 2 is what they're saying.
He is definitely going to be back in Jurassic World 2.
Awesome. Okay, and kind of the thing about this, and the interesting thing about what they're doing with this movie is no more of the Earth side characters.
We're going to be completely in Asgard. We have side characters. We have Tessa.
They're going to be comedic side characters.
We have Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie. We have Taika Waititi taking on the mocap work of Krog.
Which he gave a New Zealand accent just because he's New Zealander. In fact, I've heard that there's actually going to be a lot of New Zealand references to his New Zealander heritage.
Yeah.
We're probably not going to get them.
Probably not.
But Thor Ragnarok, it's going to be good. It should be good.
Yeah.
I mean, Thor is one of those movies that needed Thor needed an overhaul. It's gotten 2 overhauls. Thor has never been the most popular movie series. Honestly, when most people make their ranking a Marvel movie list, the Thor movies most of the Thor movies barely break the top 10.
Yeah.
We'll see where Ragnarok we'll honestly see where Ragnarok lands in ours.
Yeah. So
17 movies in. 17 movies in, and Marvel has shown no signs of slowing down.
Yep, so we'll be back after the jump.
Alright, bye.
Alright guys, we're out.
That is how you fix Thor, people.
That is how you fix Thor.
So, Thor Ragnarok, what can be... Well, we just said what could be said about it. It's the saving grace of the Thor franchise, and we'll see where it goes, because next year, when the Avengers starts, the biggest movie crossover in cinematic history, because even though the Universal Monsters started this whole thing,
they're fucking
Marvel is the one that rules this place.
Yeah.
We run this house.
So, let's get started.
So, first of all, I think this is my favorite Mark Mothersbaugh score. Mark Mothersbaugh, of course, being the former lead singer of the 80s techno band Devo. Oh, I think it's one of my favorite of his scores, just simply because it feels like he went back to his Devo days and was like, I'm gonna dig my old synth out of the garage and start playing it a bit and head for this.
It's interesting. It's especially interesting because it sounds an awful lot like he had just seen Stranger Things when he was writing the score. Because you get some hints of Stranger Things when you're listening to it.
But mostly because those are both very synth-heavy scores, and it was kind of fun that he did rearrangements of some score pieces from the last two Thor movies. So, if you're actually listening for it, you can kind of hear the score. You can kind of hear some of the more memorable themes from from Thor and Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah. So, now let's continue. Taika Waititi did a great job directing.
It feels like almost every frame of this movie is like the cover of one of those obscure metal bands that you like find on the internet under one of those articles like 50 album covers you can't believe exist.
It's just like looking through your watching this movie is like looking through your dad's old record collection in just going through the garage, looking through your dad's old rock albums. And seeing all the glam metal he was into back when he was your age.
All the like Vikings and demons and dragons and fire and all that kind of stuff. It's the kind of stuff that those really obscure metal bands that really like to make fun of how dorky glam metal is. It's the kind they eat up. A thing they just eat up.
We have Chris Hemsworth probably giving it one of his best performances as Thor yet.
It's kind of the interesting thing is that Thor is not really back in. Is that Thor is still. Chris Hemsworth has always been the big thing about these movies. He's the thing that's kept these movies from just being kind of weaker because his personality shines through in the character of Thor. Now that Thor has spent 2 years on Earth, between Age of Ultron and Dark World, we have now seen that he's probably been spending a little too much time with Tony Stark because he's a snarky bastard now.
He's a very different character from when we saw him in Dark World.
He's grown. He's different.
He's very smart-assy now.
He's not speaking in Shakespearean. He's not speaking in all. Oh, he's not halfway to speaking in iambic pentameter anymore. He's got an idea. He's a little more worldly. He's been on Earth he was on Earth for a little while, and now here he is, all these years later, and he's still bringing that to the table as he grows up.
And it's a testament to Chris Hemsworth's comedy chops. Because apparently about 80% of this movie was improv.
People keep forgetting that Chris Hemsworth is actually a really good improv comic.
He did really great in Ghostbusters, where he improved some of the best jokes that his character did.
And he did really great and he was he was in Vacation, and that was all right. I don't think the movie wasn't offensively bad, and he was okay in it. But we're not here to talk about the reboot.
But Chris Hemsworth's a really great comedic actor, and it shows in this movie.
Tom Hiddleston returning as Loki after a long, long, long absence. It feels like forever since we've actually seen him in something.
Yeah.
So it's great to have him back, and heck, even if it may just be for this one movie, which it probably won't, seeing as we still got the really, really big crossover to do. But Tom Hiddleston is back. He's still Loki. He's still just as snarky as he ever was in the Avengers. Anthony Hopkins had a really great performance. Lawrence. By the way, I don't know why people aren't saying who the third crossover character is in this, but it's obvious. It's really obvious. I don't know why they're trying to keep it under wraps.
Well, we're going to keep it under wraps too, just in case people don't think about it. Or it's too stupid to realize it.
I mean, if you've seen every single Marvel movie from beginning to end, by the way, stay through the credits! For God's sakes, it's been 10 years!
Stop leaving! We keep seeing people leaving!
It's been almost 10 years since the cinematic universe started up. We stopped doing that after the first Thor movie when we read the Wikipedia synopsis and we're like, dang it, there's another post-credit scene? So we stopped doing it. So we started staying through all the credits on Captain America.
Yeah. We have it. It's so easy. Okay, so Kate Blanchett as Hela. She was okay.
She wasn't in this a lot. She wasn't in it a lot. She was mainly just in it. I mean, the plot of the movie, she's basically the big inciting incident of this movie. She's the reason that most of the plot happens. But the fact of the matter is, she's not really the driving force of the plot. She's the reason they need to get from point A to point B. She's the reason they need to get from point A to point B, because in essence, this is kind of a road movie, but kind of not. But she's
okay. She's a perfectly serviceable villain.
She's hamming it up. She's having fun. She's cracking a few jokes. She's milks, but mainly she serves as final boss / exposition machine.
Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster. He's fine. He's Jeff Goldblum. You can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, and he has some pretty good comedic stuff. I noticed interestingly that he seems to be some kind of DJ.
Yeah, at one point we see him be a DJ. It's weird.
I think like a side character from Guardians of the Galaxy shows up for like a brief second.
Yeah,
I think it's him. It looks a lot like him, but I can't tell for sure. But I don't know for sure.
Yeah. And then let's see.
Well, there's a couple scenes where I actually felt some really deep emotions in this. There's like one involving the Hulk, one involving Asgard, and one involving Odin. And I'm not going to say what about all three of them where I started to really feel stuff, but
there was some hard-hitting moments.
There were hard-hitting moments. I mean, it's not Guardians of the Galaxy 2 hard-hitting, because those I still can't get. Still can't get through that movie without crying.
Yeah. Let's see.
Also, quick note on the soundtrack, it's pretty rockin'.
Yeah, we got some pretty good rock songs on there.
I mean, granted, I feel like they kind of wasted an opportunity not using AC/DC's Thunderstruck at any point in the movie. But hey, I'm not the director, so I couldn't say, okay, and then Thunderstruck. I assume that's how soundtracks go in this movie.
Yeah, but anyway, this is a pretty solid movie. I hesitate to put it in my top 10 of Marvel movies.
But best of the Thor franchise? Yeah. I mean,
yeah, pretty easily.
I mean, I still think the original Thor is great. The original Thor is pretty good. It's pretty great. I mean, Kenneth Branagh did a great job. I'm looking forward to his Murder on the Orient Express remake coming out next weekend, actually.
Yeah, and Alan Taylor. The less we say about that that man who made an abomination of one of the greatest sci-fi franchises of all time, the better.
Yeah. So, but anyway, Thor Ragnarok. Taika Waititi took the weakest Marvel franchise and pushed it forward. They had a clear picture of what they wanted. Marvel took a clear picture of what they wanted. Granted, it was based off of a property that they weren't sure it was going to work in the first place, but then when it worked really well, they're like, okay, be that. But hey,
we forgot to talk about Mark Ruffalo.
That's right, Mark Ruffalo. We forgot to talk about him. He is still great as the Hulk. I mean,
we got some great stuff with the Hulk because at this point he's been Hulk for 2 years. With uninterrupted Hulk for 2 years, and he basically has the mindset of a 5-year-old.
So pretty much all that stuff we said about Hulk at the beginning of this, where we said this version of Hulk isn't exactly as smart as the comic version, where he can't speak in full sentences. Okay, he still can't speak in full sentences because it's kind of the Hulk's thing that he's basically a monster whose entire brain power is created by the most base of human impulses. But now he can talk more, he can understand more. So Hulk is essentially the kind of person he would need to be for him to actually be the perfect comic partner for Thor.
Yeah.
So Mark Ruffalo did pretty well with that, and once he turns back into Bruce Banner, he pretty much picks up right back where he left off.
The two of them have great comedic chemistry.
They basically pick it up right where they left off with the whole Bruce Banner is the. In fact, I think he's pulling the scrawny nerd. I'm holding something back. The mentality that he had, that he did so well in the Avengers, but he's doing it like 10 times more because they're of plot details that are involved in this movie that I won't get into because one, it could be constituted as a spoiler, and two, it's kind of they kind of don't really explain it much in the movie, but it's in there.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that was a good movie.
Yeah, Thor Ragnarok. It's a good movie. Marvel has not been done horribly yet. Granted, I'm sure we haven't seen the Defenders yet, but people are like, we haven't seen the Defenders or Iron Fist yet, but people have been kind of meh on them.
But we're not talking. And the less we talk, and we're just gonna ignore the fact that the Inhumans exist.
And
we're just gonna ignore. And you know what? We're just gonna keep the TV and movie universes separate, like they seem to be doing.
But either way, when it comes to movies, Marvel has not really done a bad one yet. They've done weaker movies, but they have not done a bad one. Thor Ragnarok pretty much saves a franchise that while it didn't really need, wasn't really dying, it was definitely the weakest of Marvel. It's definitely the weakest in Marvel's repertoire, so it's nice to see it come back into full bloom.
Yep. So I think that's all we have left. We're almost home.
Yep. So, remember to like, favorite, subscribe, leave in the comments what you thought of Thor Ragnarok if you've seen it. No spoilers in the comments, please.
And we will see you guys next time when together we can save the world.
Bye.
Bye.